Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and this is it. After an entire week of counting down the top 100 comics of 2016, we have finally reached the top 10. And I don't want to delay you any further from finally getting to see what the #1 comic of 2016 was. But first, we have to, as always with any top 10, include an honorable mention. I know what you're saying. Honorable mention, we've been counting down the top 100 comics of 2016. What on earth could be an honorable mention? What on earth could not have fit into the top 100? Well, the books that I was too stupid to include. Yes, you see, last year, when I was doing the top 100 comics of 2015, I was about halfway through editing the video when suddenly it hit me. Where's Unbeatable Squirrel Girl? One of the best books of the year I completely forgot to include on that list. And it seems like this is going to become an annual tradition. Because I got halfway through editing these videos when suddenly it hit me, hey, where's Great Lake Avengers? Yeah, I don't know what it is about Marvel's quirky comedy superhero books, but I always forget them when it's time to make the top 100 comics list each year. Yeah, so I just wanted to stop real quick and say, this book is amazing. Absolutely love this series. It's one of the funniest books out there. I crack up every single issue of it. The characters are amazing. You have gotten to know these characters that up until this point had always kind of just been one-dimensional, jokey characters, but you're starting to get some heart, starting to get some depth to them. It's not afraid to really make a lot of witty commentary about society and about being superheroes. It is a book that so far is just working on almost every single level. If I had been smart enough to remember it, I would definitely have put it around the high 40s, like, 40, 41, 42, somewhere around there. It definitely is a book that is worth being on the top 100 comics list. I just forgot about it. It's going to happen every year. I can guarantee you next year, when we're looking back at the best comics of 2017, I'm going to forget some amazing, great series. So, there you go. Are we all good now? Yes, that's it. No more introductions. I know this was not the most professional way to lead into the top 10 books after an entire week of leading up to this. However, I just would not have been able to forgive myself if I had not stopped real quick and just pointed out how freaking good this series is. So go ahead, check it out. It definitely deserved to be on this list. However, it would not make it to the top 10 because those books are the cream of the crop. Those books are the best of the best. Those books are the something else of something else. I've run out of metaphors. Anyway, let's get into it. These are the 10 best books of 2016.
At number 10, Descender. This is a series that blew me away with its imagination and artwork right from the start, as it tells the story of this small robot boy who wakes up 10 years after an attack by legendary giant mechanical titans. But this was the year where we really got into the history of these characters, where we got to see new bonds being formed, where we started to learn what everyone else was doing 10 years ago. This series always had brains and heart, but this was the year that it got tense. This was the year that it got depth. This was the year it became a book I would proudly call one of the best out there. And at number 9 is Moon Knight, another book from one of this year's MVPs, Jeff Lemire. A few years ago, Warren Ellis came in and reinvented the character of Moon Knight and made him something brand new. And Jeff Lemire came in and found a way to tie the old to the new, while at the same time making it feel solely his own. This is a series that feels like it took everything from Moon Knight's history and finally made it work. The character of Mark Spector has never been written with this much depth and understanding, and Lemire does an amazing job of embracing the Egyptian mythology side of this character, as well as his multiple personalities, and combines all that together into a story where almost a year later, I still don't know what's real and what's a dream. Number 8, Paper Girls. I was impressed pretty quickly with Brian K. Vaughan's Paper Girls when it premiered last year, but this was the year when it went to a whole new level for me. This was the year when this tale of newspaper delivery girls who one morning get sucked into a giant time-traveling battle really started to hit those emotional notes that I've come to expect from Vaughn. This year, the characters traveled to the future to learn what had become of them, and it was heartbreaking. and the mystery of what the heck is going on with these time travelers keeps deepening, but it never frustrates me. Instead, it just encourages me to keep reading to see what the future holds. No pun intended. Number 7, Superman. I don't even feel like I need to talk about this series because I don't think there's any book out there I've discussed more this year than this Superman series. I've talked for so long about how Superman didn't feel right in the New 52 and how every interpretation of him in popular culture was trying to lean away from what made Superman Superman, and it just left us with, well, this. But this new Superman series isn't just a Superman series, it is a Superman series. This book isn't trying to mold the things that made Superman Superman for the more jaded audiences. It's not trying to push all that aside. It's embracing it. It's holding up what Superman should be and saying, this is why this character works. But it's not just retreading old stories. It's all new territory. He and Lois are married. They're in a new dimension. They have a kid. He's in a new town with a new identity. And it all works. This is a book that crafts something new while embracing the best of the old. Number 6, The Paybacks. I know that 90% of my audience right now just looked at me like I told them I was Star-Lord, but yes, Paybacks. The best book that nobody out there read. This series is basically if the Suicide Squad met the Venture Brothers. This is a series about what happens when superheroes have to borrow money to pay for their secret bases, super weapons, futuristic cars, but then they can't pay back the loan. Then they have to work as super-powered repo men, going and getting the money back from other heroes. It's a fun, witty book with amazing art and a great sense of humor, but this is also the best comic book for comic book fans. There are so many jokes, references, and plot twists in here that you will only really get if you're a huge comic book fan. Heck, there is an amazing twist when they reveal the origin of a certain character, and unless you are fully invested in the legal struggles of old superheroes, you'll have no idea what they're talking about. But if you are invested in that, then you will lose your mind. This series didn't sell well and it was canceled after only a few issues, but the final issue is still one of the best final issues of a series I've ever read. Seriously, it's in my top 5 favorite endings to a series ever. At number 5, March Book 3. The March series has been a trilogy that told the life story of Representative John Lewis, who many of you have probably come to know in the past few weeks, but if you don't know him, then he helped organize the sit-ins, bus rides, and marches to protest racist laws and policies across America in the 1960s. This is a man who put his life in danger every single day and suffered more threats and injuries for what he believed in than pretty much any of us ever will. And if there's anyone out there I would call a living legend and a true hero, it's him. However, I'm not just going to put his book on the list because of what he did in the real world. I'm going to judge this book on how well it tells his story, on how well it gets his message across, and judging it on that, yeah, it still gets into the top 5 because it's a darn good book. This final installment covers a lot of ground, but the most notable event it showed was the Selma to Montgomery march that resulted in one of the most brutal assaults on protesters in American history. And this book puts you in that moment. It makes you feel that fog of confusion and horror that surrounded everything. It makes you pray that everyone will make it out okay, even though it's a history lesson, so you already know what happened. Yes, I might have 4 books on this list I thought were quote-unquote better than this one, but this entire March series is probably the most important comic on this list. Number 4, Black Hammer. I've described many books as mysterious, bizarre, trippy, but imagine a series that was all of those things wrapped up in one giant love letter to the golden age of comics. This is a story of a team of superheroes, most of whom resemble archetypes of classic heroes from days gone by, who one day were transported away to a place that simply looks like a small country town. Rifts form on the team as they have to pose as a family to blend in, and one member of the team actually likes it here more than back home, while the rest of them are tormented by their time here and want to return. However, they can't return, and they don't know why. They have no way of reaching anyone outside the town, and that's a mystery that has been deepening with every single issue. This series not only has one of the most original premises that I've read in years, but it also does an amazing job of introducing us to each of these characters. Every issue focuses on a different character as it gives their backstory, and they're all just heartbreaking. But it doesn't stop the story to explain their past. Their past actually helps to push the story ahead. Number 3, Dark Knight, a true Batman story. Paul Dini is one of the most legendary writers in the history of Batman. He helped to create Batman the Animated Series, which many people to this day consider to be the definitive Batman series outside of comics. But this is the real story of what happened to him one night many years ago when he was assaulted, robbed, and beaten so badly that he had to have reconstructive surgery to recover from it. It's the story of how after the incident, he, a man who had already been dealing with depression, sank so far down that he couldn't bring himself to do the thing that he loved anymore. How he couldn't even leave his house after this. But it's a story about so much more. You see, Paul Dini is a writer. He's an animator. And like so many people in that career, he thinks like these characters. He can hear their unique voices in his head. And it's the story of how after this happened, he couldn't help but hear Batman, the Joker, his whole rogues gallery there in his head at every turn talking to him. Batman telling him that he needed to get back up. The Scarecrow telling him that he had to be afraid. The Joker telling him to stay home and embrace his shut-in lifestyle. But in the end, it's also a story about the importance of pop culture, about how it helps us in times of need, about how even if Batman isn't a real person, he can still be there to lift you back up. And as I've said many times on this list, I'm not just looking at the books I love, I'm looking at who the target audience is and how well that book works for them, and I was the target audience for this book. Time to get serious on you guys. About a month ago, when I started reading all these books for this list, I had my identity stolen. Someone got my cards, my bank account, spent a ton of my money, and I got paranoid. I was afraid to go online. I was afraid of everyone looking over my shoulder, and it haunted me thinking about what I should do about that. But when I read this book, and he talked about how you have to pick yourself back up, you can't let the bastards of the world win, it really hit me. It was the exact message that I needed at that time. I would have gladly put this on the top 10 even if it hadn't happened, but because I could relate directly to the message of this book and it was the exact message that I needed, yeah, this easily gets up to number 3. Number 2, DC Universe Rebirth. This is another one of these books that I don't even think I need to cover. I have talked about Rebirth more than any other topic on this channel. I covered every single new release from this relaunch for months. I talked about how much DC needed to go back to their roots, to embrace everything that made them work in the first place, and that's exactly what this one-shot did. It was able to kick all of that off, not with a massive 8-part storyline that went on for almost a year. No, they did with just one single issue what most comic book companies can't accomplish over the course of years. And what is really stunning to me is that the comic book industry, much like any entertainment industry, tends to be a place where it's nobody's fault if you fail, where the readers just didn't get it if your book didn't sell well, and yet this one issue came in and actually, gasp, apologized. It flat out apologized for not understanding their own books for years. And then in one issue, it returned the love, the family, the friendship, the history of the DC Universe, all leading up to one of the most moving panels of the year. Sorry if you still haven't read it, but at this point, I think it's safe to spoil this one. When it got to that point where Wally was fading away into the Speed Force, there was no hope left. He had accepted his fate, and he was going to fade into oblivion because nobody out there could remember him. Nobody could remember a character who represented hope, friendship, and love in the DCU. But then at the last second when Barry said, Wally, and reached out and grabbed him, my heart stopped. This book might be number 2 on this list, but that was the number 1 moment of the year. And the reveal that was the Watchmen who did this, who removed the hope from this universe, that was brilliant. I know you can say, oh, well, they just did that so that way they can hold on to the rights, but honestly, it made 100% sense. The Watchmen was one of the first books to say, yeah, this fun comic booky stuff wouldn't work in reality. Time to make these heroes dark and gritty, and that's what led us over the course of many years to the New 52, so seeing them now literally doing the thing that they figuratively did to the comic book industry, damn, that is just so brilliant on a level I can't even describe it. And at number 1, The Vision. Okay, can we all just stop and recognize that this is the biggest Dark Horse candidate of the year? Yeah, let's look at the rest of the top 10. Some truly amazing indie series with unique visions unlike anything else in comics, a personal story about the importance of this medium from one of its greatest creators, real-world stories about real-world heroes, and a book that single-handedly saved an entire company and universe. And yet the winner of Best Book of the Year is the story of a lesser-known Avengers character settling down in the suburbs with a family. Yeah, let that sink in. A story that started off that simple grew into the best book of the year. And do you know why? Because this book did every single thing right. I'm not exaggerating. I can't point to one thing in this book that it did wrong. For the longtime Avengers fans, this book treated the history and continuity of the Vision with more respect than any character I've read about in years, and it took that history and made it accessible for new readers and made you understand how that led the Vision to where he is in his life today. And from there, it uses the idea of a family of androids moving into a small neighborhood to serve as a metaphor for racism, xenophobia, pretty much every kind of prejudice you can think of, and it worked into the story perfectly. It feels totally natural, like of course that's the message that you should use the Vision for. Not to mention, there's a murder mystery right from the start that just keeps building tension with every issue. And on top of that, there's the story of a woman facing an emotional breakdown. There's betrayals that I never saw coming, but still were explained in a way that made me believe it, and a narrator that just kept upping the suspense with every single page. I knew this book was something special from issue 1 when the narrator just casually said, oh, and in a couple of days, this thing is going to happen, and I almost did a spit take. And that's the biggest thing about this series. That's the thing that makes this the best book of the year. It did tension and suspense better than any series I've read in probably my life. This is the first time I have ever gasped at a comic. No, seriously, like that. There was an issue where two characters were confronting each other, and with every panel the tension kept rising until I finally realized what was going to happen the page right before it happened, and I gasped and didn't want to turn the page. I have never read a comic where I was actually afraid to turn the page before. This year was an amazing year for emotional stories, but in the end, this one left an impact bigger than any others. And the thing I can't even comprehend is that this book was forced to be canceled early when Tom King had to leave Marvel to go to DC, and I thought that it was going to ruin it. I thought that they were going to have to wrap up the story early, and there's no way that they would make the finale as emotionally satisfying as it should be, but they did it. It didn't ruin it. It ended in a way that wouldn't even make you think it was cut short. That is a magic trick in this industry. Alright, that's it, folks. After so many days, an entire month of going back and looking at all this, we are now finally done with the top 10 comics of 2016, and it's time to look ahead to 2017. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me throughout every single one of these issues, for all of your suggestions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot say that enough. Again, if you guys ever want to get in contact with me on Twitter, on Twitch, on Tumblr, you can just look for @ProfessorThorgy. And of course, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these top 10 books. Thanks again, everyone. Come back next time.